Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
So today we're going to tackle something that I think is really personal for a lot of language learners.
Oh, definitely.
It's this whole experience of language comprehension, specifically speaking styles and why your listening skills can sometimes feel like a total roller coaster.
That's it. One day you feel like a genius. The next day you feel like you've learned nothing.
Exactly. You feel great, and then suddenly you're completely lost.
And that fluctuation is really the heart of our mission today. We're going to unpack that, that really frustrating feeling.
Right.
We want to get to the fundamental why behind that variability. And maybe more importantly, look at the tools you actually need to bridge the gaps between these wildly different ways people talk.
Okay, so let's just dive right in with the central idea from the sources we looked at.
Let's do it.
Which is that everyone, and I mean every single person, has a unique individual speaking style. And that style is what makes them either easier or, harder to understand.
Well, it's not a standardized thing at all. The whole premise is that it's so individualized, and it really depends on you, the listener. What's perfectly clear for one person might be just a total wall of noise for someone else.
So it's not about a speaker being good or bad necessarily.
Not at all. It's more about that specific collision, between the speaker's habits and the listener's ear.
And that collision is what leads directly to what we're calling this comprehension roller coaster.
Mm-hmm.
The source material just captures it perfectly. Mm-hmm. You have this aha moment where you feel fantastic about your listening because you understood everything.
Right, probably because that speaker style just clicked with what you already know.
And then the very next day, you listen to someone else, a totally different style, and you understand almost nothing. And you just feel awful about your progress.
And the practical consequence of that is actually fascinating. It makes it incredibly difficult for you, the learner, to accurately gauge your own level.
Gauge or measure, yeah.
If you can understand, say, 90% of a really clear YouTube video, but then only 20% of a casual phone call between two native speakers, where are you?
What's your level? It's an impossible question. It's like trying to measure your car's top speed by driving on a perfectly smooth road and then a really rough gravel road and trying to average the two.
That's a great analogy. The gravel road will always make you feel slower, even if the engine's powerful.
Exactly.
And if you only stick to the easy parts, you might really overestimate how ready you are for the real world. But if you only listen to the hardest stuff,
you'll just get discouraged. You'll underestimate your own progress.
Precisely. And that struggle to figure out your true level is, I think, a really universal frustration for learners.
So we have to kind of look past the measurement problem and just focus on the goal. What does this all mean for someone moving forward?
Well, the ultimate objective, and we saw this consistently, is to understand people in general, across all kinds of contexts and styles. You want that feeling of being able to step into any situation, a fast podcast, a family dinner, and just follow the flow.
Which means you have to master a variety of styles.
Exactly. Especially the more challenging ones, the ones you might be avoiding right now.
So let's connect this to some actionable strategies. How do we stop relying only on that smooth road you mentioned?
This is where we shift from just, diagnosing the problem to actually building a solution.
The sources identify two main pillars for this.
Two main pillars, yeah, for improving your overall understanding no matter who's talking.
Okay, so pillar one is the need for a variety of content.
Mm-hmm.
We know a lot of listeners find that one anchor voice, like a favorite teacher or a podcast host who speaks very clearly, and they rely on that.
And look, that's a great starting point.
For sure. But there's an explicit warning here. Just because you understand one native speaker does not mean you can understand others.
Not even close. It creates a kind of comprehension bubble, right? It limits your exposure and it leaves you really vulnerable the second you hear a different accent or a different pace.
Right.
And this is where, honestly, real improvement can be a little bit painful. If the content you're listening to is always easy, you aren't actually improving your ability to adapt.
You're not stretching the muscle.
They're not. So we need to actively seek out those different linguistic habits. And that brings us right to pillar 2.
Which is vocabulary breadth.
Yeah.
Now, this is interesting to me. I get that vocabulary is important, but if my main problem is speed and accent, shouldn't I just focus on training my ear? Why is vocabulary so central to style?
That's a really good question, but the two are completely intertwined. The sources describe vocabulary as a big part of a person's speaking style.
How so?
Well, think about it. Someone's style dictates their register. A speaker who uses really formal language, they're going to pull from a very different set of words and phrases than someone who uses casual slang and idioms.
So if I only listen to academic lectures, I might know the word paradigm, but I'm going to completely miss an idiom like spill the beans.
Exactly that. You're only absorbing the words that one type of person uses. But the more words and phrases you know just across the board,
The more likely you are to understand different people.
right. And the less you have to rely on hearing every single word perfectly, your big vocabulary acts like a buffer against all those stylistic changes.
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting, though, because we have to admit, it's not only about vocabulary and phrases.
Not even close. Now we have to pivot and talk about the other, maybe more hidden elements of style.
Like pronunciation, accent.
Rhythm, the
Yeah.
way a person links words together. These are the
Yeah.
hidden hurdles. And they're particularly dense in English.
The source material explicitly says that English is a particularly difficult language to understand. Why is that, linguistically?
It really boils down to our sound and stress system. It's incredibly complex. So you contrast English with a language that's very phonetic, where one letter always represents one sound. When you see the letter, you know the sound. When you hear the sound, you know the letter.
And English is?
Not at all like that. We have, as the source says, more complexity. For example, we use weak forms and the schwa sound.
Ah, the schwa, the famous sound.
It's the most common vowel sound in English. It's what turns the word for into fu and two into two when we speak naturally. And that one thing makes spoken English sound completely different from how it's written.
This is why that example from the source just rings so true. It's so common to understand a sentence when it's written down.
You see the words, you know the grammar.
But then you fail completely to understand that exact same sentence when you just hear it.
It's because of connected speech. We don't say words one by one, we blend them all together.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Take a simple phrase. Did you eat yet? If I say it slowly, word by word, it's eat.
Did you eat yet?
But in rapid native speech, those words just merge. They blend together. And the phrase often comes out sounding like jeet yet.
Jeet yet? Wow, okay.
Yeah. And if you haven't trained your ear to recognize that specific connected form, all the vocabulary in the world won't help you.
That's a phenomenal example. So for you, the learner, the takeaway here is don't be discouraged if you've studied vocabulary and grammar for years, but you still struggle. There is, as the source says, more to it.
So much more. And that improvement is just going to take time spent with a huge variety of content. Your brain has to hear jeet yet hundreds of times before it just automatically accepts that it means, did you eat yet?
So to make this more concrete, let's look at a specific case study. The source speaker's own style is held up as a practical example of this kind of clear communication that can help learners.
Right. It's a way to kind of visualize what clarity actually means in practice.
Yeah, analyzing their style gives us a sort of blueprint. They're described as speaking relatively clearly and not very fast, even at a normal speed.
And a key detail is that they don't mumble.
Which the source defines as, what? Talking without opening your mouth much.
Exactly. It suppresses the sound. But this speaker claims to have the opposite problem. They focus so much on enunciation, on opening their mouth a lot to form the words clearly.
And they joked about accidentally spitting sometimes because of it.
Yeah, because they're being so dramatic and articulate with their speech.
But that level of articulation isn't just a teaching tool they turn on and off. They said they've always talked this way. It's just their innate style.
And that leads to a really fascinating point about the intent behind their communication. They actually identify as a storyteller.
Someone who loves recounting things.
Right, and that natural tendency towards a more dramatic delivery really helps with clarity. But the deeper skill is how they assess their own talent.
That's right. They admit to having very few technical skills, which is funny.
Yeah.
But they say their main undeniable skill is just communication in general.
And they define that skill very, very specifically. It's not just speaking clearly. It's about focusing on the details of the communication itself, noticing things others might miss.
And here's the most important part.
Yes. Communicating in a way that is always appropriate for my listener. That adaptive, listener-focused intent is what really drives the clarity.
Okay, so let's apply this. How does a style like that help you if you're, say, an intermediate learner, a B1, B2, C1 level?
You're at that tricky stage. You've mastered the basics, but a lot of authentic native content is still, as the source says, just a little too hard.
Right. It's full of jeet yet moments.
Exactly. So the clear content from this kind of speaker serves as an essential bridge. It lets you tackle advanced topics at a normal speed, but with a degree of clarity that random content just doesn't have.
So the recommendation for that level is what the sources call guided native level content. And they use the speaker's own U.S. Conversations podcast as an example.
And that's a perfect case study. That podcast has the clear speaker talking with other people who, have different styles, different accents, different speeds.
So it provides that crucial variety we talked about in Pillar 1.
It does. But it's still way easier to understand than a conversation between two random people because you, the learner, already understand that one clear speaker really well.
You have an anchor, a familiar voice to hold on to while you navigate the trickier parts.
Yes, and the guided part is key. This isn't just throwing you in the deep end. This kind of content is guided by word-for-word transcripts, and it includes definitions of all the key idioms and slang they use.
It's the perfect strategy, really. It lets you challenge your comprehension with varied styles, but without that feeling of being completely overwhelmed.
It's that sweet spot. It lets you actively connect the written form, the vocabulary you already know, to that complex, connected spoken form we've been talking about.
Okay, so let's synthesize all of this.
Yeah.
What's the main takeaway?
I think the main thing is that fluctuating comprehension is completely normal.
It's not a failure.
Not at all. It's a structural challenge. It's just part of dealing with different speaking styles and the unique complexity of English sounds.
Especially things like connected speech.
Right. So the solution isn't to just stick to the easy stuff. The solution is deliberate exposure to variety, consistent vocabulary building, and just accepting that it takes time. You need a sheer volume of listening to adapt to all these hidden hurdles.
The real goal is general comprehension, the ability to adapt to anyone, not just one familiar voice.
Exactly. Which brings us to our final thought for you, the listener.
Okay.
So the source really emphasized that the speaker's main skill is communication, focused on adapting to the listener. And they contrasted this with, a self-professed lack of technical skills.
Right.
This raises a really interesting question for you as you progress.
As you move from that B1 level up to C1 and beyond, and as you seek out all this vital, varied content, here's the question. How much does focusing on the communication intent and context, really understanding the story someone is trying to tell and why they chose those specific words, start to become the true difference maker in mastering comprehension?
Maybe even more so than just memorizing advanced grammar rules.
Exactly. I'd encourage you to think about that dynamic, the intent versus the mechanics, as you go out and find your next piece of challenging, varied content.